Alright, so welcome to part 2 of this tutorial where we're going to actually start building this. Just a little heads up, the completed project is already on my repository, so you guys can definitely check it out. Alright, so you can see over here that you can go to DV Design off to-do list. I'll just provide the link below. But besides that, what I want you guys to do is have PERN JWT tutorial and the PERN to do app opened up. This is going to be our starter code, and then we're going to progressively take some of the little code from PERN to do app inside there. So you are going to need to have experience with Git. We're not going to go over Git add or Git commit. I just want you guys to just clone this onto your computer. So to do so, which I'll show you guys in a moment, if you are new to it, I suggest you guys first download Git onto your computer. And then there's this nice quick tutorial that's going to show you how to copy a Git repository to your local computer. Right? So it's from this guy named Data School. So it's 4 minutes and it's nice and quick. All right, so let's get started. So I'm going to go over here and I'm just going to simply clone this. So you can go over to this green button, just click over here, go to your Visual Studio Code. So I created a folder called off to-do list tutorial. You can name this whatever you want, but this is where we're going to clone our repository into. So inside, since I already have Git installed, as you can see here, I am going to say git clone, and then I'm going to put in that link that I just copied, and then I'm going to put this as dot. Dot indicates that it's going to be downloaded in this root over here. So if I click enter, you're going to see it's going to start cloning it. It's going to be nice and quick. And then I'm just going to simply go into my client folder, and then I'm just going to do npm install. Likewise, I'm going to go inside of my server folder, and I'm going to npm install as well. All right, so let's just do this really quick. Okay, there we go. Okay, so in the next section, while this thing is downloading, I'm just going to give you guys a quick overview of the actual application so you guys can get yourself mentally prepared. Okay, so I'll see you guys in the next section. Alright, so I figure since the application is still trying to be downloaded, I just give you guys a light preview of the completed project. So if you guys look inside here, it says PERN JWT tutorial, but this is really just the completed project, okay, so just remember that. Okay, so inside here, you're going to see that this thing right here is based on the database design that we designed in part 1. Okay, so let's look at this really quick. Inside here, we create a database called off to do, and this is going to contain our users and our to-dos table. Okay, so inside here, I specify my primary key as UUID, so that's my circuit key and default value of this UUID generator. And then we have our attributes inside here, and along with that, we have our primary key. So this is going to specify this user ID is going to be our primary key for this table. And now, if you look into our to-dos table, you're going to see that we have the same process. We have our to-do ID as our primary key. So it says serial, which means it's going to be auto increment. So it's still circuit key. We have this UUID for the user ID. So this is our foreign key. And then we have our attributes. So right here, we say primary key is our to-do ID. And then you can see over here that we have this foreign key that's going to say this user ID over here is going to be referencing that user table with the user ID attribute, right? So this is our way of connecting these tables together and to build a relationship. Okay, so besides that, the other different ones that you're going to see is this to-do dashboard. So inside here, instead of simply doing const user equals to await pull that query and then like selecting only the username, it's going to be a little bit more complex because we're going to combine the users and the to-dos table. And whenever we get the users, we want to be able to find all their to-dos. That's privately for themselves. All right, so you can look at that little thing that we talked about a little bit, where we have that join operator over there. Now, I do want to fix something that I didn't mention in the last JWT tutorial, is that this shouldn't be a post request, rather it should be a get request. The reason I say that is because we're simply trying to get data. We're not trying to manipulate anything. Okay, so just remember that. Everything else is pretty much all the same, except we have that authorized middleware where the person has to be authorized in order to create, update, or delete a to-do. All right, so besides that, let's look inside the client folder, which is probably the most complex out of all of it. So inside here, you're going to see that we have our regular JWT stuff with our login, register page, but now you're going to start to notice, oh, and also we have a landing page too, but that's just kind of like for decoration purposes. But right here, you're going to see we have a dashboard component that's going to contain our dashboard. And this dashboard right here is going to contain all our to-do list components, which is going to be placed inside here. So remember, in our PERN stack to-do list, we had the edit to-do, we had the input to-do, and we had the list to-do inside there. All right. So that's basically how this whole application is going to combine. And then I'm going to talk about how we can actually, work on the application without it refreshing whenever we update, edit, or create some data or create a to-do list, right? So we're going to be using the use effect in order to do that new feature that I talked about. All right, so I think my stuff should be completed downloading. So in the next section, now we're going to start coding this thing. Okay, so I'll see you guys then. Okay, so let's start building this application. So I have here my database.sql and my db.js. This is what we're going to be working on. And also make sure that you turn on your client side along with your server side just in case you find any errors. Now, this is a little bit strange, but I already seem to build the database out. So just comment this thing out for now, because I want you guys to make this out of scratch for full practice. All right, so let's just get rid of this and let's just pretend this is not there. Or better yet, you can use this as a reference as we build our database. Okay, so let's look back inside here really quick. And let's check this out. You can see that we set a few constraints between these tables. So we have the users, we have a to-dos table. The user has a primary key constraint for the user ID, and the to-dos has a primary constraint for the to-do ID and a foreign key constraint for the user ID. Right? And the important part to understand is that the to-dos can't exist without a user. Right? So notice how we have a one mandatory over this side. So that means that this right here can never be null. Okay? So essentially, by me building this relationship, I'm basically saying that this value can never be null. It can't be empty, right? Because it needs to have a user connected to it. On the other hand, a user can totally exist without a to-do, right? So we're going to see how we can create this type of constraint, right, by using the not null. Okay, so let's go back inside here really quick, and let's just start designing this. The first thing we need to do is we need to create a database. So it seems to me that I already have something called auth-to-do. So I'm just going to simply call this auth. So I'm just going to say create database. Remember, we have to create database first before we start creating tables. So create database, and I'm going to call this auth-to-do list. All right. And I'm just going to simply go inside my Postgres database. I already have it all up and running. And I'm just going to simply push that inside there. All right, so it's going to now create the database. That's awesome. Okay, so I'm just going to get out of here. And now I'm going to start creating my table. Right, so we have the users table and we have a to-dos table. So how are we going to define this? Well, first of all, we have to say create table. And we have to define this as users, or whatever you want, but in my case, I'm calling users. And inside here, I'm going to simply say user ID, and I'm going to specify it as UUID. Because remember, we're going to be using a UUID in order to set the primary key for the other users. Okay, so we have this UUID, but now we have to set a default value. Because remember, every time someone is added into our system, we want to automatically generate this UUID. So we're going to run this function. So as a default, we're going to be running this function called UUID generate v4. And this is a function that's going to be coming from our extension. So the thing about Postgres is that they have all these extensions that you can download, and then it's going to make your life so much easier. In our case, they have this extension to generate a UUID, so we can run this function. Okay, so notice how I didn't say primary key yet, so I'm going to get to that real soon. So then we have the regular stuff like username, which is a varchar of 255. And I'm going to set this as not null. And then you're going to see user email. So I'm going to also set a varchar of 255, but I'm also going to add unique inside here. What this means is that anytime a new user is added to our database, or sorry, added to our table, we need to make sure that the user email is different from the rest of it. Right? We want to make sure it's unique. Okay, so now that that's set up, we can finally add a user password, which is just going to be varchar 255, and it's going to be not null. Now this is where we start defining our primary key, right? This is the important constraint. So we're going to put in primary key, and then we are going to be pointing at this thing over here. So our primary key is going to be user ID. Okay, yeah, that's all it takes. And of course, if you're still confused, I'm going to do a review at the last section. Okay. So next, we're going to work on to-dos. I'm going to say create table called to-dos. And then I am going to make a primary key, so to-do ID. And this is going to be a serial. So I'm not going to be using UUID. I'm going to just use an auto increment. All right. And inside here, I'm going to have a simple user ID. So remember, this is going to act like our foreign key. So I'm going to simply say that this thing is going to be a UUID. So the data type is going to be a UUID. Inside here, I'm just going to have a simple description, and it's going to have a varchar of 255, and I don't want to make this not null. Once that's set up, now we have to set up the same exact thing that we did in user table. So I'm going to say primary key, and this thing is going to be pointing, so if you guys guess this correctly, it's going to be pointing at the to-do ID, right? Because that to-do ID is acting like our primary key. Inside here, we have the foreign key right here, and this thing now is going to be pointing at our user ID, right? But we don't stop there quite yet because we need to reference it to something. So I'm going to add something called reference, and then I have to specify that it's this table that I want to reference, so this user table, and then what I'm going to be putting inside here is that user ID. So what I'm trying to say inside here is that I'm trying to go to user table, and I'm trying to point at this section over there. All right, awesome. Yeah, that's all it takes, right? And this was all easy because we designed our database design. Right, that's kind of why database design is probably really important, because it makes your process a lot more faster as well once you kind of understand what's going to happen. Okay, so now that I have this set up, I'm going to simply go inside here, and I'm going to open my command line again, and I'm going to just start inputting the data. Now, you're going to start to see an error, so I'm going to just do this really quick. Okay, so if I go inside here, and oops, make sure that you go into your off to-do list. So let's do that really quick. Keep forgetting that sometimes. All right, so now that we have this set up, I'm going to simply take this thing, copy it, and I'm going to paste it right there. And you're going to start to notice an error. Oh, it says no function matches the given name and argument types. So the reason it's saying that is because we don't have, this function is unrecognizable, right? Because we don't have the extension. Remember how I said Postgres has this extension that we can download in order to actually make our life easier. So we need to actually download this UUID stuff or extension. So what I'm going to do is run something called create extension. So this is an extension I'm getting from Postgres. And I'm going to say if not exists, so if it doesn't exist yet, then we are going to simply download this extension called UUID OSSP. You can almost think of it as almost like NPM, right? So you can think of NPM having all these libraries, and then you have to kind of download it to your application. Okay, so it's kind of like that. And now you can say that it says create extension. So now if I simply take this thing again and I paste it inside there, you're going to see that now I can create the table. And now I can simply go inside here and then paste this one as well. Hey, look at that, we created our tables. And now if we want to check out their relationships really quick, so I'm going to simply say, let's say /dt or select all from users. Okay, so let me just turn this off really quick. So select all from users, and I'm going to select all from to-dos, and you can see that our relationship is all set up. Now you guys don't see the constraint, but I'm going to show you this really quick so you guys can really see that we did add constraints like primary key, foreign key, and not null. So I'm just going to simply say /d +, and then I'm going to specify the table that I want to see the columns and the data types and the constraints. So I'm going to say d+, and I'm going to specify the user table first. And you can see here that indeed that we have a primary key that is going for the user ID. And then you can see over here that this email key, remember we set this unique constraint. So it's suggesting that this user email must be unique. And also, you're going to also notice this as well, that the to-dos table has a constraint over it, so it has a foreign key connected to it. So it's referencing it. All right, yeah, so pretty neat. And of course, you guys can look at the other way around. So we can say .d+, and we can look at the to-dos table. And we can see that this also has constraints as well. We can see that the primary key is the to-do ID. And we can see that the constraint for the foreign key is that it's going to be referencing that user ID, right? So this may look a little bit interesting, but if I decide to delete the user table, if I say drop table users, look at this. Now drop table users because the other object depends on it. It depends on it. Remember, it's a one mandatory relationship, so it depends on it. So I forgot what I was going to go for this, but especially what I'm trying to say is that we can't really drop this user table because the thing is that the to-dos has a reference towards it. right? In order for this to really function, we have to delete the to-dos table first, then the users table. All right, so hopefully that didn't confuse you guys a little bit more. Yeah, so awesome. Yeah, we created our database, and I think the last thing we need to do to get everything all set up is to simply go inside our dv.js and to make sure we change this to the proper database that we're using. Remember, configure this whatever way you configure your Postgres. So inside here, I'm just going to simply take in my off to-do list, and I'm just going to paste it inside here, and everything should be good to go. All right. So I think what we can do is I can really just make some sample data so you guys can see how this join operator finally works. Okay, so I'm just going to go inside here, and I'm just going to add some data. So I'm just going to go back here. Sorry, I keep switching around, but I'm just going to make some fake data really quick. So fake user data. So I'm going to just simply say, let's say insert into the users table, and I just need to specify the, I think it was the username. So I have to specify username, and also I have to specify the user email along with the user password, and I'm good to go. And my values should be, so in my case, I'm just going to call it Henry, and I'm going to add henrylee213 at gmail.com. And I'm just going to add a user password, a user password of KTHL822. And don't forget the semicolon. So now I can just simply take this data right here, and I'm just going to paste it inside. Just get some fake users inside. Okay, and we'll just change this up really quick. So we'll call this Jacob, and I'll just call this Jacob as well. And yeah, let's just keep the same password as well. So I'm just going to go inside here, and I'm just going to paste this inside. All right, so we got 2 users, and now it's time for us to add some fake to-dos data. So we're going to insert into to-dos. This is going to have a simple user ID. Remember, we have to specify the foreign key, and then I'm going to specify the description. Okay, so now inside I'm going to have a values. So what is the value for our user ID? So that's a great question because we're going to find that right now. So I'm going to go inside here, and I'm going to say select all from users. And now you can see, well, let me make this a little bit better. You can see that we have our UUIDs over there because remember we produced that. So I'm going to simply take this, and I'm just going to copy it inside here. And then I'm just going to simply say my description is hello world. So now I can just simply take this data and I can spit inside there. Okay, so I'm going to do this. Oops, I think I accidentally pasted on something else. So I'm going to copy this again. I'm just going to go back inside, and I'm going to spit this thing out. Oops, seems like I have an error over here. Ah, yes. That's because I called this to-dos. Remember, I called the table to-dos instead. So we're going to paste this inside here now. Oh man, another one. Yeah, make sure you keep this single quote as well. Okay, so I'm going to keep the single quote, and I think that should be the last error that we're going to face. Hopefully. There's always going to be errors, but we'll see. Okay, so now you can see we inserted data, and now I just want to change this up a little bit. I can just simply say, let's actually use an actual to do because I keep using statements. So let's say clean room. And now I can simply take this data right here, and I can spit inside with that same user. All right. Okay, so now let's see how this inner join is going to work, or this join statement. Okay, so if I want to see all the relationships, remember, if I say select all from users and I select all from to-dos, you're going to notice that all of these to-dos are coming from Henry, but not any of them are coming from Jacob. So if I want to be able to only get the relationship between the tables, so only like data where relationships exist, I'm going to say select all from users. So I'm going to go to the users table, and then I'm going to say inner join. So inner join, remember, is the one that's super strict. It's only going to get couples. So I'm going to go for the inner join, and I'm going to connect it with the to-dos table, and then I'm going to run this on keyword. And what it's going to say is that I want to connect it whenever the users.user ID is going to equal to the to-dos.user ID. Okay, so check this out. If we do this, we get the relationships. You see that? right? And then you could just simply see that the data were clashed to each other. Now the thing is, you're going to start to notice that we don't get Jacob. And the reason for that is because Jacob doesn't have any relationship between the to-dos table. He didn't meet the condition. Okay, so let's say we want to be able to add Jacob, and this is what we're going to be using. So I'm going to use something called a left join. Remember, the left join is going to take anything from the left table even though there's no relationships. So I can simply say select, and you know what, I'm just going to copy all of this back up again. Okay, so I'm going to simply use a left join instead, and you're going to know something interesting. So if I type inside here, you're going to see that I get all the users with the relationships, but then I also pop up with Jacob with all these null values. Okay, so what on earth is happening? You remember how I said that in the left join, it's going to continue to take all users from this tables, even though they have no relationships, and then it's going to take all the couplers that do have relationship with each other. All right, so that's what we're going to be utilizing. All right, so hopefully that clarifies a few things about the database designs and why it's really effective in order to building our application. So in the next section, what we're going to do is start taking some of our data from the PERN to-do list and adding it to our routes. All right, so I'll see you guys in the next section. All right, so we're going to start building our routes. As you can see here, we already completed our database SQL and our db.js. Okay, so just a little heads up, just to prevent any confusion, inside our dashboard routes, you guys will start to notice that I'm accessing request.user.id. So it's going to work the same exact way like our JWT tutorial, because in the JWT tutorial, what we had to do was actually brackets and then request.users. The reason I'm able to do this is because I created a different payload. So my payload looks like this, and instead it has a user object along with the ID property. But what I used to do, like in the tutorial, was simply a user property that was connected to the user ID. Right, so just to kind of give you guys a heads up, you guys shouldn't face this problems, but just in case you are a little bit confused of what's happening, this is the reason why. Alright, so let's just kind of get started into this. So you guys can definitely get rid of this just to add some more space. So this is going to be the route that's going to get all our to-dos, so all to-dos and name. So it's going to get us our name as well. And then we're going to create a route that's going to create a to-do. Then we're going to have one that's updating a to-do. And finally, one that's going to delete a to-do. All right, so yeah, pretty straightforward. And you'll start to see that this looks exactly verbatim as our PERN to-do app server index.js file. You can see here that we have get all to-dos and we have create, update, and delete. We're simply going to copy and paste and put them inside there so we don't have to reinvent the wheel. All right, so I have to make this out of scratch because this one is going to require a join operator. All right, so let's get started. And also, we don't want to limit it to one because now we want to be able to get multiple to-dos. So eventually we are going to have to get rid of this. Okay, so I have const users. That's going to equal to await pull.query, so basic stuff. And now I'm going to select. Remember, I want to get the username including the to-dos, so I have to use the join statement. So I'm going to say select all for now from users, and I'm going to be using an inner join, but you're going to soon see why inner join is not going to be the best solution for us. So inner join to-dos, and then I'm going to create a condition of how they're going to connect. So whenever the user, that user ID is going to equal to the to-dos, that user ID. Okay, so this by itself is going to work all right. Right? This is going to give us all the relationships, but here's the reason why we don't want that. If I were to run this, and don't forget the semicolon, you're going to see that we get all the couples. Okay, so that's working all right, but the problem is that what happens if we want to get a user that doesn't have any relationship with the to-dos yet? Let's say, for example, like Jacob. You can see that Jacob, so let me just get all the users again. You can see that Jacob is not popping up inside there because he has no relationship. And that's a little bit problematic because that means is that if we do log in as Jacob, we're not going to be able to get our name back because we don't have a to-do. So to ensure that we still continue to get the name back even with no to-dos relationships, we are going to need to make a left join. So we're going to get this code again, and you're going to know something interesting when I say left now. So when I say left, it's going to say, oh, relationships, and it's going to give me Jacob as well. Because keep in mind that the left join is simply going to continue to get every single data from the left table, even if there's no relationships. And if there is, it's going to add that inside as well. Okay, so this is nice and all, But we also need to start being specific because currently right now we're seeing every single to-dos. So we want to be able to specify which to-do or like get our own private to-dos. So we have to say where the user.user ID is going to equal to, in this case, we just want to simply have Jacob, right? Because Jacob has no interest into seeing Henry's like to-do items. He just wants to see his own. So we're going to say only when it equals to this user. And as you can see over here, that we just get Jacob. All right, so let's just write that logic inside there. Again, if you guys are feeling confused in any moment, that's perfectly okay because I'm going to do a review over the routes for the servers, okay? All right, so now that's good to go. Let's just change this to a left join. And we are going to add that where clause. So it's going to say where the user.user ID is going to equal to $1. And as you guys guessed, that is going to be request.user.id. Okay, so yeah, it looks pretty straightforward. And this is going to work out perfectly okay for us. But some of you guys may start to notice that this query is looking a little bit long. So there's actually a way to shorten this by using alias, or I think I pronounced that correct, but alias is what I think they're called. But essentially what it is that you get to shorten the table's names instead of using the full name like user, to-dos, and users again. So I can simply say from users as you. So let's just capitalize this just to kind of make it obvious. So as you, so I'm going to change user as you, and I'm going to change to-dos as T. So now I no longer have to say users anymore. I can just simply say you, and I can leave this as a T, and also I can name this as just a U as well. All right, so that should simplify a few things. You don't have to do this, but that's what a lot of people like to do just to kind of make things easier to write down. Okay, so let's just kind of test this one more time to make sure it works perfectly fine. Okay, so currently right now at the moment, I'm just going to test with Henry's data. So I just want to simply get Henry's data instead. So when Henry logs in, I'm just going to simply paste that right here. And you're going to see that Henry gets his data back, including his username. All right, so yeah, not too bad. And what we're going to do next is we're going to test this with Postman. So I'm just going to go open my Postman over there. And I'm just going to open this thing up really quick. Okay, so in order to actually hit this route, remember, we have to have a JWT token, or we have to be authorized. So I'm going to go inside here. So http://localhost, and you know what? I'm just going to register a new user. So remember inside our server.js, what we had inside here is we have to access the /authentication first. And now I'm going to hit register because we have a route in the JWT off. And I think, yeah, I have to just add email, name, and password. So let me just add those things really quick. So raw, and it's going to be JSON data. And inside here, I'm just going to leave a email. That's going to be the result of, let's say, josh@gmail.com. Wait, do we already have a Josh? Yeah, no, we only have a Jacob. Okay, josh@gmail.com. And I'm going to have a name. That's going to be Joshman. And finally, I'm going to have a password, which is going to be the usual. All right, cool. Now, if I click enter, oops, and make sure you make this a post request. So if I click enter, I should be getting a token back, which I do, so that's awesome. So now I can just simply take this and make another request to that dashboard, right? So now, with this token, I'll be authorized to these other routes. So I'm going to go inside here, run http://localhost 5000/dashboard. If you guys don't remember, essentially right here is that we have to hit the dashboard in order to hit those routes from the dashboard from here. And then we could just hit /. So I almost forgot to mention this, but we do not want to make this a post request. We're not trying to add any data, rather we're just trying to get data. So it's better practice in order to just make a simple GET request. All right, so I'm going to change it to that. And now I'm going to go to my headers. Remember, our token or middleware is looking for something called JWT token, and then we're going to just add our token inside here. Okay, so now if we click enter, we should be getting the data back. And look at that. Look at that. We get the username, we get the user password, user email, to-dos, IDs, and you can see here that we have null. Reason for that is because Joshman is a totally new user on our platform, and he hasn't created a to-do quite yet. All right, so of course we don't want to send the password to the front end, so we want to be specific that we want to simply have the username, And then, oh, okay. And also I want to be specific. This may look a little bit weird, but keep in mind that join operators aren't there to manipulate data. They're simply there to make it better to view the data and just join tables together. So it's still a GET request. We're not manipulating anything. So we have to still specify which attribute we're trying to get from which table. So in this case, I'm getting username from the user table, and I'm also getting the to-do. So I'm going to get to-do ID, and I'm also going to try to get the t.description. All right, so now if I go back inside here, you're going to see that I get the data back. And it should be a little bit more simplified. Yeah, there we go. Look at that. So we get our username, we have our to-do ID and description, and I think that's all the data we're going to need. All right, so it's time for us to kind of add data so we can see this thing a little bit better. All right, so that's pretty much all we have to do from here. So let's go down and create a to-do. So go inside your GitHub repository, or into my GitHub repository, and you're going to take in this snippet called create a to-do. So I'm going to steal this, and I'm just going to put this right here. Make sure you change this to router. And also make sure you put a S over here because we create our table as to-dos, not to-do. Okay, so we also have to add that middleware because we want to be authorized in order to create a to-do, and also we want to be able to access our user ID. Okay, so this is actually not going to be much different, but remember inside our to-dos over here, if you guys remember, oops, yeah, so that's the main reason why you need an S. So if you remember, we have a user ID attribute. So we have to add that inside there. Remember, we want to be able to push that user's data so we can reference it with a join operator. So inside here, I'm just going to simply go in here and just add the user ID. All right, and we're just going to add a $2. And as you guys expected, this is going to be request.user.id. Right, because we want to be able to push this data inside that to-do. Okay, since that's all up and running, let's double check. Seems like everything's perfectly fine. So we'll just test this really quick to make sure we can actually add data. So I'm going to add another route, and inside here, I'm going to simply say http://localhost 5000/dashboard, and then we're going to go into /todos. And this is going to be now a post request because we're actually adding data. And I have to go to the header. I'm going to add a JWT token, and I'm also going to add that value over there. Oh no. Yeah, let's make sure we get rid of all of this data. Okay, let's get rid of this, and let's go back inside here, and let's just take our token once again. So I'm going to copy this, I'm going to put this in here, and I'm going to put that token inside. So now, if I click enter, oops, I almost forgot we also have to add a description, right, because we're trying to add data. So raw JSON, and our description is going to simply be, let's say, clean the dishes right now. Okay, so if I actually have this right here, if I click enter, I should be adding the data. So awesome, you can see that, look, we are able to add our description, and also, because we actually specified to push this early on from the middleware, we're able to push that little user ID inside there. So now we can use our join operators to get the data. Now I'm just going to add something else as well. So clean my dogs, for example. And if I click enter, okay, we added another data. So now I can just simply go back into the route where I get everything. And if I click enter, you're going to see that we get our data back. So this is what we're going to be sending to the client side. So we're going to be mapping through these things, and then we're going to be spitting out these to-dos. All right, so yeah, that's pretty solid. So what is the next? I think the next thing we're going to work on is probably going to be update. So update is not going to be too difficult, but we are going to be adding like something new to this. Okay, it's just going to be the same. So I'm going to take this update over here, and I'm going to spit this inside here, and I'm going to add the middleware. So you can see we already have an error because we have app inside here. So authorize, and I'm going to change this to router, not app. All right, so what type of changes needs to get done? Okay, so this by itself would still continue to work properly, but there is a problem to this, which means that if one of the users, so if I decided to just show you all the users really quick, so this will still work, the query will, but the thing is that a user that's named Joshman is able to edit someone else's to-dos, right? Because the thing is that we don't have any restrictions. as long as we have the description and we know the to-do ID, which as you can see here, we can obviously get that. We can get the ID from there. We can just simply actually add a new description and a ID that's being specified in the database, and we'll be able to change someone else's data. We don't want to do this. We want them to only change data that's in their own private to-dos. Okay, so we have to be specific. So what I'm going to say is that where to-do ID equals $2, and now I also want to specify that their user ID must equal to the same one that they're trying to update. So I'm going to say and whenever the user ID is going to equal to $3, and that's going to be coming from that request.user.id. All right. Okay, so yeah, that looks pretty solid. And also, we are going to add errors. So the thing is that if it turns out that they're not getting any data back, where they don't actually follow like this little query that we create over there, where they actually don't have their user ID equal to the actual user ID. So what we can actually simply do is we can say if the update to do dot rows, and also I forgot to mention this, but we have to change this to returning star because we want to return the rows table back to us. So I'm going to say update.rows, and I'm going to say if this actually equals to 0, because it means that none of it is following this kind of query over there, I'm just going to simply say return res.json, this to-do is not yours. Okay, so that was like a mouthful, so let me demonstrate what I mean exactly. So I'm just going to go back inside here, and I'm going to go open my command line, sorry, my Postman. And let's just edit some data. Okay, so let me give you an example because some of you guys may still be a little bit confused of what exactly I was talking about. So if I go over to dashboard, and remember I'm trying to update, so I'll hit to-dos, and then I'm just going to put my random ID over there, and I'm going to make this a put request. Okay, so currently right now, the user that we are in right now is this user right there, which is Joshman. But let's see whether or not we'll be able to change this user, which is going to be Henry. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to attempt to change number 2, which is a mine, because I'm Joshman. And if I go over to my headers, add my regular token inside here, and along with the token over here, so I'll just copy this once again, and I'll paste it right here. All right, so if I go to the body and I attempt to change the description to, let's make it really obvious. And let's say description equals to you got hacked. Cancel. So if I click enter, you're going to soon see that's going to say, oops, sorry, remember to change this to to-dos because our table is pluralized. Okay, so hopefully that should be the last error we get. So if I click enter to this thing, you're going to see that's going to tell me that this to-do is not yours. Ah, okay. So now, if I decide to go number, let's see which one I want to go for. Let's go for actually number 4 because that's our own. So if I go to number 4, and I just change this to, let's change this to this is my to-do. So now if I click enter, it's going to tell me that to-do was updated, right? Because that's my actual to-do, and it turns out that this equals to the JWT token that was given to me. So now I can check up here, and you can see that indeed that it has updated the to-do. Okay, again, I'm going to do a quick review after this whole route completion is done. Okay. All right, so the last route we're going to be working with is going to be deleting something. Sorry about that, you guys. So it just had something wrong with my computer. But anyway, let's kind of get back into this. Okay, so again, we're going to be working on this delete route. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to get back inside here. And inside, I am going to take in this delete at to-do route. Remember, this is coming from my PERN to-do app. So I'm going to take this really quick, and I'm just going to spit it inside here. All right, so what are we going to do? So we are going to have to add that authorized middleware again so we can access that user ID. Make sure you change this to router. Okay, so again, we're going to be applying the same exact concept like we did with update. The thing is that anyone who has access to the to-do ID is able to delete anyone else's to-do ID. So we want to be able to make sure that it is the actual user that will be able to delete that. So I'm going to add this AND statement, and I'm going to say whenever the user ID is is also going to equal to $2, and that is going to be coming from request.user.id. Okay, so it's going to not only check for this, but it's also going to check whether or not you actually are the user that created that to do. Okay, so now, and also we're just going to run the same exact command as well. So I'm going to say if delete to do, and make sure you make a returning star because we want to turn the data back, what exactly we deleted. So if delete to do dot rows dot length is going to equal to 0, and I think I spelled this wrong. This needs to have a capitalized T instead. So a delete.rows.length equals to 0. Then we're going to simply use to res.json, and we're going to say that this to do is not yours. Okay, so now that we have that all set up, we're going to test this one last time, and then we're just going to do a quick review. So let's hope that this actually does end up working. So I'm going to make a delete request now, and what I want to delete is, for example, number 2, just to test this thing out, right? Because I want to make sure that I am deleting my own private data, not somebody else's. So I'm going to delete number 2 since that's Henry's, and I'm Jackman. So let's do this really quick. And if I click enter, you're going to soon see that's going to tell me that, oh, not again. I keep forgetting to add an S to this. Okay, so now we're going to test this again. So we're going to click enter now, and you're going to see that this to do is not yours. All right, so it seems to be working perfectly fine. The reason why it says cannot set header after they are sent to the client is because we didn't return this. So make sure you add a return inside here, right? Because it's going to keep going unless we add that return, it's going to stop there. All right, so now let's actually start deleting things that's actually ours. So I'm going to go back up here and I'm going to delete number 4 because we don't need this anymore. So if I go to number 4, it should say to me that to do was successfully deleted. Let me click enter one more time. There we go. So to do was deleted. And we can check, in fact, to make sure we did delete that data. And look at that, we did. So awesome. That was basically our front end. So not our front end, but that was basically our Restful API, all the routes that we are supposed to be working with. Okay, so in the next section, I know this is a little bit overwhelming, so I'll just give you guys a quick rundown of what we did. Okay, so I'll see you guys in the next section. Alrighty, so we're just going to do a quick review, and of course, feel free to skip this part if you really fully understand. I'm always going to provide timestamp below this video, so you guys can actually skip around. Okay, so anyway, we're going to focus on the database SQL. As you can see here, what we have is that we created this attribute user ID, which is going to be UUID, and basically by default we had to generate a UUID whenever a new data was entered to our table. And the thing is that we had to download an extension for this thing to work carefully. The reason why this says default is because, remember, one of the rules of a primary key is that it can never be empty, right? It can never be null. So we have to actually automatically generate something for it to work functionally. And then up here, we have the regular attributes, but then we introduced this constraint called primary key that was going to be pointing at the user ID, indicating that that is our primary key. And also we have this unique constraint, which suggests that all user emails should be unique. Okay, then we have this to-dos table, which is pretty much the same. We specified that this is UUID. We specified the to-do ID was serial, so this is auto increment. And then we said the foreign key was pointing at the to-do ID, and we said the foreign key was user ID, and we had to reference the user table own user ID attribute. All right. Alrighty, so we're going to go back into dashboard. This is the routes that we focused on. Okay, so this is probably one of the most confusing, sorry. And the thing about this is that what we have here is that we use something known as a left join. So we basically combined the user table, and then we combined the to-dos table. The reason why we didn't do an inner join is because it was only getting information that had relationship with the users and the to-dos table, which is a little problematic for us because the thing is that there is going to be situations where people don't have any to-dos, yet they still want to be able to get their own name back. So we have to do a left join to get all the user data, even though they don't have any relationships. And then if they do have a relationships, we continue to spit back their data where they have a relationship with the to-dos table. We also introduced this concept of alias, where essentially you don't have to write out the full name consistently. You can simply say we're user as U, or you can say to-dos as T, and then you can actually replace it with u.userid, t.userid, and u.userid, right? That's just to keep things simplified. And then also we had to do a where clause because we didn't want to get everybody's to-dos, right? We didn't want Henry's data to be clashing with like Josh Mann's data. So we had to specify whoever is currently logged in. We're going to look at their JWT token. So we're going to look at the request.user.id, and then we're only going to get data based on that ID that we received. All right. So next we had to create a to-do, which was pretty straightforward. All we had to simply do was use that request.user.id and insert it inside here with the column. So we can actually make sure or see whose data it is. So we can do that join operator. And then we had update a to-do. So the thing about update to do was that you can see everything is pretty straightforward until we reach over here. The reason why we had to specify the user ID is because if we didn't have this, the person can just simply have a new description and they could add a to-do ID if they knew what the primary key of that to-do was, and then they can simply update something that wasn't theirs. So we had to actually like set a constraint where they have to have the same ID to that to-do's creator's ID. All right. And then delete has the same exact process where essentially you can delete anything if you have the to-do ID, but then we had to add a end statement that says where the user ID must equal to the same exact ID to the to-do ID's creator's ID. Oh god, that was so many IDs. But yeah, essentially this is just here to add extra security so other people can't mess with other people's data. All right. So yeah, that's pretty much the gist of it. So in the next section, what we're going to do is start building a React application. So I'll see you guys in the next section. All right, so we're going to start working on the client side. So make sure you do npm start for your React application, and you also turn on your server code. Okay, so if you guys remember inside our client code over here, and I go over to components, you're going to see that all we have is a dashboard, login, and register, which makes sense, right? Because this is just our simple JWT application. So if you guys remember inside our little demo over here for the JWT tutorial, if I went to /login, you're going to see that what I do is I have the login component over here. And then if I click submit to login properly, you're going to see that I opened up the dashboard component. Okay, so some of you guys may notice that we don't have the name, and that's perfectly okay because remember we changed the Restful API. So later on we have to tune a reapplication to that. Okay, and also our to-do components are going to just simply be shown over here. Okay, so how are we going to structure this? Inside here, I'm going to create a new folder that's going to be called dashboard, and it's going to hold all of our dashboard components. So I'm just going to move that inside there, and also make sure that you go inside your app.js and you change it. So go to your component section, and it's no longer going to be /components because you can see that we have an error inside there. So it's going to be /dashboard and then our dashboard component. All right, so everything should be working perfectly fine. Now that that's done, what we're going to do is we're going to create a new folder inside the dashboard, and this is going to be called To-Do List. Essentially, this is going to be holding all of our to-do list components. If you guys remember the PERN stack to-do list tutorial, so let me just kind of go back into my repository. So make sure you guys open this thing up. Let's go over to client, and then we'll go to src, and then we'll head over to the components over here. And what you're going to see is that we have this edit, input, and list to-dos. Right, so it's just going to be all these files that's going to be placed inside there, because eventually what we're going to be doing is we're going to import that inside our dashboard component. So this is going to be first called edit to do.js. So I'm just going to simply go inside there and I'm just going to copy all of the code. So I'm going to copy all of this, and someone also mentioned that I forgot to change class to class name, and they're completely correct, so I'll make sure I change that right now. So I'm just going to go inside here and change all of this to class name. Alrighty, and then I'm going to take this out. Let's go to the other files. So we're also going to have the input to do.js. So I'll make that file really quick. Input to do.js, and we're just going to copy all of this. And I believe I changed class name to all of these, so that should do the job. And then finally, what we're going to have is that list to dos. So make sure you guys go back as usual. Let's create a new file called list to dos.js. And I'm going to go inside here, and I'm just going to take that code. All right, there we go. Awesome. So I don't think we need this anymore. So I'll just basically make this big again. Okay, so you can see here that what we have here is the to-do list components all inside here, and then we're going to later on import it to our dashboard.js component. Okay, besides that, also we're just going to add a simple landing page. So I'm going to create a new file, and I'm just going to simply call this landing.js. Okay, so in the next section, what we're going to be doing is we're going to create the landing page, and then we're going to put it inside our app.js. Okay, so I'll see you guys in the next section. All right, so we're going to work on the landing component, and I'm going to get rid of these errors over here. So I'm going to go over to my login. I'm going to get rid of that redirect because we don't need that anymore. And I'm going to go to my register, and I'm also going to get rid of that. All right. Okay, cool. And now what I'm going to do is go back into my landing. And we're just going to build this really quick. So we're just going to import React as usual from React. Make sure you lowercase that. And then we're going to make a functional component. I actually don't even think we need the fragment because all we're going to be doing is using a Jumbotron. So I'm going to just add a class name to this thing really quick, which is going to be a class name of Jumbotron. In case you don't know what a Jumbotron is, it's essentially a class provided by Bootstrap 4, and it's going to allow us to have this nice showcase on our website. Then after that, I'm going to have h1 that's going to say welcome to To-Do City. And then we're just going to have a p tag that's just going to simply say sign in and start, let's lowercase that, sign in, and start building your to-do list. Okay, so pretty simple, and we'll just stop over there just to see at least what it looks like. Make sure you export this thing really quick, so export default landing. And then I'm going to go over to my app.js, and I'm going to start importing that stuff inside here. So I'm just going to say import landing from /component, and then we're going to get that landing. And the landing is going to be following the same stuff like the login and register component. So what we're going to do is we're going to add another route. In fact, it's so similar. Let's just simply copy this over here, and we'll just paste it inside. So I'm going to put this inside here. So we just need to change this a little bit. We need to get rid of this slash, or this login. And then we also want to give this to the landing instead. And we no longer need to have this right here, so I'll get rid of this. And this is all we need to do. So let's check it out really quick. So if we go inside here, back to my React application, let's go over to slash, and let's see what that looks like. And we have to log out first. So let's go now back to slash. So at least we know like it's working for the redirect part. Ah, that looks pretty nice. Okay, let's actually make it look a tiny bit better. Of course, this is not going to be a great looking landing page, but it's going to get the job done. Okay, so I'm just going to open this thing up, go over to landing.js, and let's just kind of add some margin top 5. I'm going to add a margin top 5 inside here. And remember, we're going to have the link tags from React Router DOM that's going to allow us to head to the register and login route. So I'm going to go inside here and just kind of go into React Router DOM. And inside here, we're just going to simply take the link. So the thing about the link tags is that they're inline, so we have to make sure we have a margin left on each one of them, or just on one of them, so they don't clash to each other. So this is going to be login. So we're going to leave that to, we could go to /login. We're going to type that. And then I'm just going to simply copy this thing over here, and I'm just going to paste it at the bottom. And this one's going to be now register. And we're going to put register inside here. And we're also going to add a class name. That's going to be a btn primary. And then we're also going to copy the same exact class name, and we're just going to put it down here. And also we have to add a margin left of 3, because keep in mind, you'll see soon what I mean. So if I go inside here, you're going to see that we're going to have a little bit of space. All right, so yeah, that's our landing page. Awesome. You can see that everything works as it should be, so at least we can actually have something on the landing page. All right, so in the next section, what we're going to do is start working on our dashboard and just kind of get inside our input to-do list. Okay, so I'll see you guys in the next section. All right, so since we have our landing page up, what we're going to do next is we're going to try to fix basically our input to do. So that's what we're going to be working on next. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm just going to start off just connecting my input to do inside my dashboard. So I'm going to go inside and I'm just going to go to my dashboard.js and I'm just going to make a section that's going to call components. And the first component I'm going to take in is just going to be simply input to do from / to-do list and input to do. And we'll just put this at the bottom. All right. Okay, so let's see how that looks like. So if we move this on the side, this should actually have the little search over there. So nice, awesome. And also I think we can make this look a little bit better. So I'm also going to clean this dashboard up. So instead of actually having that H1 dashboard, I'm going to get rid of this. And then I'm just going to say the name and their to-do list. So I'm going to leave it like this. And also, I will try to do a deflex so I can bring this to the side as well. So I'm just going to add that really quick. So I'll just add a flex, so deflex. And I'll just put them inside here. So make sure you make that deflex. And I'll just drag all of this code, except the input to do component. And that should be a little bit better. So hopefully that moves to this side. And then we're just going to add a margin top of 5 and a justify content around. Okay, so let's see how that looks like. So hopefully that looks a tiny bit better. Okay, cool. There we go. Alrighty, so time for us to work on this input to do. Right, currently at the moment it doesn't work because we have to configure it. So if we go inside the input to do component, what you're going to notice is that it's hitting the wrong route. Remember, we have to hit /dashboard before we go to /todos. And also, this route is private now, so we need to show our JWT token. Okay, so let's do all of that. So first of all, easy change. We can change this to dashboard, and then we're hitting the correct route. But even though we're going to hit that route, we need to be able to access the JWT token. So right here, I'm going to be using a constructor called headers, and essentially it's going to allow us to create a new header object. All right, so I'm going to go up here, and I'm going to say const my header. Okay, so the thing is, oh, I even forgot to tell you guys this, but the main reason I have to do this is because I want to be able to add more than one header inside there. Right, I still need to have content type, but I also need to have that JWT token. So inside here, I'm going to say new headers, and then I'm going to run it. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to say my headers dot append. So I'm going to put inside this object, which it's going to first contain the key, which is going to be content type, and then it's going to have the value, which is going to be application /JSON. All right, and then I'm going to go my header again, and now I'm going to insert the JWT token, and then I'm just going to simply go to local storage token. All right, so pretty simple. And all I have to do is just get rid of all of this and replace it with the object that we created. Cool beans. Okay, so let's see if this is going to work now. So I'm going to comment this out because I don't want to refresh, because eventually we're going to make this application not refresh anymore. And then inside here, I'm just going to leave a simple, I'm going to parse the data so we can see it better. So I'm going to say const parse response, and that's going to equal to await, because remember it's going to take some time to actually parse it, so .json. And then I'm just going to simply console.log the parse response. Alright, so let's see what this is going to look like for us. And I also have my database open so we can see whether or not we really saved it inside the database. Okay, so I'm going to open my inspect so we can see if this is going to work for us. I'm going to go to my console. Let's delete all of this. We're going to fix all these issues towards the ends, but remember, this is giving us a 404 because remember we changed our routes. Ooh, seems like we missed another one. Okay, so I'll change that all in the end later. But anyway, if I decide to say clean room, and I click add, we should get something to pop up. Hey, look at that, cool. Look, we get our data back. So we get our to-do ID, our user ID, and we also get our description. So we get our foreign key that's already connected to it. And then if we want to check inside our database, I can go inside here, and I'm already inside here, so I can just simply run select all from to-dos. And then you can see that we have clean room. I believe I called it clean room. Yeah, there we go. Cool. And it's being led to that user over there. Yeah, so everything seems to be working perfectly fine. Okay, so what we're going to do in the next section is we're going to be working on our list to-dos components so we can display all of our to-dos. So I'll see you guys in the next section. Okay, so we're going to work on the list to do component, and I find this is the one that contains the most code. Okay, so we'll talk about it as we go by. Okay, so what we're going to do is go inside dashboard, and we're going to import that component, list to dos, from lash to do list and list to dos. And I'm just going to simply go down here, and I'm just going to take in that data. Okay, so if we've done everything correctly, you're going to see that indeed we have a table. All right, so everything seems to be working well. So let's go inside the list to dos component and see what we can change. So the thing about this is that if you guys remember working on our PERN stack to do list, we had to actually get all the to dos, and then we had to set it to a state over here. So when we had this array, we were able to map it and then like set it to the edit to do as a props. Now the thing is that we actually don't need this anymore, because if you guys remember, if we look inside our, I'm going to comment this thing as well, we don't need this anymore because if you look inside our dashboard.js, we already have something that's going to make a request. This get profiles over here is going to get all of our to-dos, and it's going to get our names. So it'll just make sense to just simply pass all our to-dos that we're receiving as a props to list to-dos. All right, so hopefully that makes a little bit more sense. So let's actually go over here and let's fix this thing really quick. So this is hitting the correct route. However, it's actually in the wrong method, so it should be a get request. Remember, we changed it to a get request because we're only getting data. We're not sending or manipulating anything. And the header seems to be correct, so yeah, that's all we have to do. And I'll just simply say console.log parse data to see what we're getting back. So I'm just going to go inside here, and I'm going to open my inspect. And I'm going to head over to my console. Okay, let's see what data we're getting. Hey, look at that. So you can see right here that indeed we are getting data. So if I decided to go inside the input to do, and I said testing 1, 2, 3, and I click add, and I refresh this, don't worry, we're going to be working on this later, but we refresh this, you're going to see that we added an extra item. So pretty neat. Okay, but why aren't we getting the name back if we're getting all the data? The reason for that is because what we used to do here is that we were accessing an object, but now it's an array. So we actually need to go for the first item. Okay, so that's kind of the main reason why I decided to do a left join, because I wanted to continue to get that user's data, right? So at least I can get their name so I can show it, even if they don't have any to-dos. So if we refresh this really quick, you're going to see that the name should pop up. There we go. So pretty cool. Okay, so now what I'm going to do, just to kind of make it a little bit cleaner, I'm going to set a state that's going to be called all to-dos. So, and we're going to say set all to-dos, and we're going to set this to an empty array. Because remember, we're getting like an empty array, so we're just going to simply pass this to our list to-dos over there. I'm just going to pass this data down. So now that I have this, I'm going to simply go down here, and I'm just going to set. I'm going to say, let's also get rid of this. And I'm just going to say set all to-dos equals to parse data. All right, and now we have that state for our disposal, and I can just pass it down here. So I can just simply say all to-dos and just repeat the same way as all to-dos. All right, so now I'm going to go back inside, and I'm just going to do console.log to see if we really get the data. And make sure that you take it out as well. So I'm going to destructure all to-dos. And I'm just going to go inside here and just console.log that. Okay, so now I'm going to go inside here. And I'm just going to see whether or not we do get the data. So set all to-dos is not a function. Don't know where I got this from. It doesn't seem to tell me where the line is. Okay, so let's actually go up here. Hopefully I'm not putting in the wrong data. So all to-dos seems to be working perfectly fine. I'm just going to go over to my dashboard.js, make sure that I'm not adding any bugs. Huh, seems to be, oh, there we go. That's because I forgot to use a use state. Okay. Okay, so now everything should be working perfectly fine. So I'm just going to go inside, and you can see that indeed, if you look into list to-dos, we actually get the data back. All right, so pretty nice. Okay, so it logically makes sense that if I go inside my list to-dos, maybe I can just simply take this data and just put it inside here. Okay, so let's try that really quick. I'm going to put all to-dos, and I'm going to check it out, and let's see what we get. Okay, that's a little bit strange. We're not getting the 4 items, and in fact, we're getting a bug. And right here, it's telling us that we have 0 items. Okay, so why is it showing us this thing? Okay, so the thing about this, and this may be a little bit strange, but remember, when we go inside our dashboard, we are going to have to take some time to get that data. But the thing about React is that it's going to immediately run its other code, right? It's just going to continue to run this thing over here where it's going to pass all to-dos to all to-dos. Currently, right now at the moment, it's a empty array, right? We haven't actually set this yet because it's still going to do that fetch. But immediately when it gets the response back, it's going to continue to send the data back inside there. You can see that's the main reason why we continue to spit it all out in list to-dos. But when we put it inside our use state, it's not going to re-render our state, right? It's not going to re-render it. Therefore, this to-dos is going to continue to look like an empty array. So just an empty array. Okay, so what can we do to solve this problem? What we can do is actually use a use effect. Okay, so let me demonstrate what I mean. I'm going to take this out really quick. Now, I'm going to explain some of the parts that's going to help us with this. So the thing about the use effect is that it's only going to run. So actually, let's base it on this argument over here. The great thing about this is that use effect allows you to put in arguments, and inside here, it's going to keep track of the states that you put inside this array. So for example, if we're trying to keep track of this state over here, so remember, we're trying to see changes inside this thing. So what it's going to say is that it's going to watch this all to-dos state over here, and whenever it changes, then it's going to run this use effect. And guess what we're going to do next? What we're going to simply say is set to-dos, and then we're going to set it to that all to-dos. And I'll explain this in a moment. So at least I want to show you guys that it does work properly. So I'm going to go inside here now, and let's look inside, and you're going to see that we actually get our data back. Whoa! And also, just to prevent any confusion, I'm just going to make this back into an empty array, right? That was just a demonstration. But you're going to see that it still continues to work properly. See, let's look inside here, and you're going to see that we continue to get our items. Okay, so let me just kind of repeat this one more time, right? Just in case you guys are a bit confused. But the basic idea is that even though we are getting all to-dos, the thing about the use state is that it's not going to re-render the state. It's going to continue to get that empty array. So what we have to do is create a use effect that's going to watch whenever this thing is going to change. And if it does change, then we set to-dos to all to-dos. All right, so we're going to be using this in the next section really quick to prevent re-rendering from happening. Okay. Alrighty, so everything seems to be working perfectly okay. So I think the next thing we can work on is the delete button, right? Because the thing is that we do have that filter where it does delete the information, but if we refresh it, the data is going to come right back. And the main reason for that is because we're making the wrong request. So we're just going to go inside here, and what we're going to do is we're going to change this a little bit. It's no longer at /to/do/id. We actually have to hit the dashboard. Okay, and then also this is going to be a private route, so I have to say headers. And that's headers is just going to be a simple JWT tutorial, or sorry, JWT token. And it's going to go for the local storage .token. Do the job for us, and don't forget a comma, so let's just add that really quick. And now let's see whether or not we're able to successfully delete the data. Okay, so I'm just going to delete something, and I'm going to refresh this, and let's see whether or not that works for us. There we go. All right, so everything seems to be working properly. Now let's actually fix this issue about this constant refreshing, right? When I actually say hello, for example, and I click add, I have to refresh this. Oops. I have to refresh this thing over here. And then if I try to delete something, I have to refresh it. Okay, so we're going to fix that now. And we're going to be using the same exact technique over here where we're going to use that use effect. Okay, so inside here, inside our dashboard over here, what I'm going to run, or what I'm going to have is going to be a state. All right, so you guys don't need to understand this yet, but I'll code this and I'll explain along the way, and I'll repeat and review what I just did. Inside here, I'm going to actually have something that's going to be called to-dos change, okay? And then I'm going to have something that's going to say set to-dos change. And this is going to be a simple Boolean. So I'm going to set this to false. So it's going to check whether or not this to-dos change. So let me explain my logic with this. Essentially what I want to do is with the use effect, remember, it's going to be watching that state, and whenever it changes, it's going to do something special. It's going to run and actually get our data or do whatever we want it to do. So what I'm going to say is that whenever a deduce changes, whenever we add something, whenever we delete something or edit something, I want the use effect to run. Okay? So inside here, what I'm going to do is I'm going to say deduce change, set deduce change to false. And what I'm going to do inside here is I'm going to be watching this use effect. Remember, we actually don't have a state we're watching. It just re-renders. It just runs whenever it's re-rendered. So what I'm going to be putting inside here is that I wanted to watch this deduce change. Okay. And I'm just going to simply put under here. I'm going to set over here. I'm just going to say, well, actually, let's just keep it like this for now. But I'm just going to say set deduce change equal to true, or sorry, equal to false. Okay, so it's still a bit confusing, but you'll see later on what I'm going to do. So now I'm going to simply take in this thing. I'm going to take in this function that I created, and I'm going to pass it inside my input to do first. Okay, so I'm going to pass this function. I'm going to say, what was it called again? Deduce change. And I'm going to put inside that function, which is going to be called set deduce change. Actually, it'll make a little bit more sense if I say set, right? So we can keep it consistent. Okay, so now that I put this inside here, I'm going to be going inside my input to do. Okay, and I'm going to take in that props, and I'm going to say set, what I named as set deduce. Oh, I have a bad memory. I keep forgetting what I wrote down. What did I name it as? I passed the props as set deduce change. Okay, so I'm going to take in that props set deduce change. Okay, so now that I have this inside here, check this out. Now that I'm actually getting the response, now that I'm actually setting the data, now I can just simply put this down here, say set deduce change, and I can set this to true. Okay, so that looks a little bit interesting. So now I'm going to take this out really quick and watch this. If I say hello and I click add, whoa, we add the data and it didn't refresh. Okay, why is this happening? So again, I want to repeat this again because it's a really important skill. If we look inside to our dashboard, the thing is that I have the state that's going to check whenever something changes, whenever the deduce changes. I set to false automatically. So the thing is that I have this function that can set things to true. So whenever I'm adding something, like when I'm adding a to-do, basically I am doing a change to the to-dos. So I set this to true, and then it's going to run that use effect, because remember, that use effect over there is going to run whenever something changes within the state. And then it runs the get profile, and then it's going to set things to false, right? Once things are completed, once the process is completed. So that's why we're able to actually instantly add the information. So hello world, for example, and you can see the data is automatically added. And plus I can refresh this just to prove that it still stays over there, that it's real. Okay, so hopefully that makes a little bit more sense. And what I'm going to do inside my input to do is that I don't really want to constantly keep typing and then it still stays over there. So I'm just going to go inside here and just simply say set description. And I'm just going to set that to an empty string, right? So it can just be empty. I think I set it as an empty string. Yep, there we go. So now we can just simply, let's just delete all these data really quick. So if I say, hello man, and I click add, you're going to see that we continue to add the data and it clears itself. All right, so yeah. So anyway, in the next section, what we're going to be working on is this edit, because you guys can see that it's not going to work. Okay, so I'll see you guys in the next section. Okay, so I wanted to fix this quick bug that I found inside our list to dos. Some of you guys probably already noticed this already. So anytime we look inside here, it appears that we actually have, one array over here. And if I decide to delete the data, it looks like now that the array is empty, right? We have no to-dos anymore. However, if I decide to refresh this, you're going to see that we get something a little bit strange where we get this thing over here with no description. Okay, so why is this happening? The thing is that we actually are continuing to get an object. Our list to do is still getting this object, and this is what it looks like. If you guys remember, our object looked like this. It had a username of Henry Lee, a to-do ID of null, and a description of null. If you guys remember doing our left join, essentially we were still getting all the users even though they didn't have any relationships with any to-dos. So we were still getting this object, and when it was given to our list to-dos, it was like it didn't really care what it was, it just continued to map it all out. And therefore we were getting this little error over there. Okay, so how can we fix this issue and just show nothing when there's actually no to-do? So logically, what it makes sense is that if the to-do ID, so if the first item to-do ID doesn't equal to null, then let's map every to-do. Okay, so let's actually write that logic first. So I'm going to go inside here, and I'm going to simply say if to-dos dot the first item dot to-do ID equals to null, or doesn't equal to null. Therefore, that means we might actually have something. Okay, we actually have a to-do inside. Not might, we do. So if I actually look inside here, you're going to start to notice that this logically makes sense. However, we are going to continue to get an error. And what's going to say is that you cannot read property to do ID of undefined. The reason why it's saying that is because remember in the beginning, we just have an empty array. So it doesn't even know what the first item to do ID is. It doesn't even know what this thing over here is. So we actually need to specify, first of all, we have to make sure that we actually have an item inside our array. So I have to simply say if to-dos dot length doesn't equal to 0, and if it does actually, if this is a true statement, then it's going to the next one. It's going to check if to-dos dot first item dot to-do ID doesn't equal to null, then we're going to continue to run this logic, and you're going to see that now it's going to work for us. All right, so let's see if that data works, and you can see now we appear to have nothing. Even though we actually get items back, what it's trying to check now is that it's going to see whether or not it's going to check whether or not our to-do state actually does have something. And after that, then it's going to check the first item and see whether or not to-do ID equals to null or not. If it doesn't equal to null, then it's going to map the data. But in this case, now if I decide to add an item, you're going to see now that if we look inside the first item of the array, that now it appears to actually have a description. So now it's going to continue to print it out. All right, so hopefully that makes a little bit more sense. So what we're going to do in the next section is we're going to finally work on our edit to do. Okay, so I'll see you guys then. Okay, so we're going to be finally working on our edit to do component. So some of you guys will start to notice if we click edit, it's not going to work. And that's because we don't have the JavaScript side for Bootstrap 4. So we're just going to go over there really quick. Alrighty, and I'm just going to head there and just get the CDN. And I'm going to go inside my index.html and just put it below or right beneath my body tag. Okay, so I'm going to take this data right here. I'm going to go over to my index.html and I'm just going to spit it right inside here. Alright, so now everything is going to work perfectly fine. So if we look inside here, you're going to see that now we can actually click this button and I think it should work. There you go. So the thing about the edit to do is that we actually don't need to do much. We just have to change the routes. So I'm just going to go open this a little bit bigger and I'm going to head over to edit to do. And the thing is that it's hitting the wrong route. And also it needs to actually need a JWT token because the thing about it is that it's trying to hit a private route. So let's first change this really quick. So it's going to be dashboard instead. Oh man, I can spell dashboard. There we go. Okay, and then we have to specify the headers. So we don't want to just simply have a content type. We want to be able to describe that JWT token. So I'm going to use the header constructor again. So const headers, so my headers, is going to equal to new headers. We're going to run that. And now we can simply say my headers.append. And we're going to continue to put those data. So the first one we're going to have is content type. Content type. And inside there, we're just going to simply have the application/JSON. Okay, so after that, then we're going to add another item inside here, which is going to be my headers.append. And that's going to be the JWT token. And we're going to get that local storage.token stuff. So that's where our token's located at. Alrighty, so now all we have to simply do is just steal this data and delete it. And we're just going to simply put my header. So our pre-made object, header object. Okay, so everything seems to be working okay, and I'm just going to simply comment this thing out to see if we are able to successfully edit to do first. So I'm going to move this to the side really quick, and I'm just going to go to the bottom, and I'm going to attempt to change this. So I'm going to say hello world, and now if I click edit, you're going to see if I refresh this that it's going to say hello world as well. Okay, so since we don't want this thing to consistently keep refreshing, we're going to use that little function that we created inside our dashboard. Remember, we're going to check whether or not a to-do's change. And if it does change, like if it does get a new to-do's, if it does update, we're going to set the state to false. Set the state to true. And then it's going to run this use effect, which is going to get the new to-do's, and then it's going to place inside our list to-do's component. Okay, so what I'm going to do next is I'm just going to pass it down inside here. So I'm going to pass this function inside. So I'll take this and I'll pass it inside here. And then I'm going to go inside my list to do's and I'm just going to pass it as a prop. So I got to take that. So set all to do's, I believe that's what I call it. Set all to do's. Oh, sorry, list to do's change. Okay, so now that I have this logic, and don't forget the comma, now I'm going to add it down inside here. Oops. Seems like I have an error. Oh, that's because I accidentally added an M. Okay, so now I'm going to go down here and I'm going to pass it inside my edit to do. So I could just pass the same exact function. And now I'm going to take it up inside my edit to do. And I'm going to pass it inside here. Set to do's change. Okay, and now I could just simply run this function now. So I could just say set to do's change. And I'll be able to set it to true. So I'll just say set to do changes, and then I'm going to set that to true. And now you're going to see that we no longer have to refresh it. It's going to work now. So I'm going to bring this aside, and now I'm going to simply go inside here, and I'm going to say back to hello, and I'm going to click edit, and you're going to see that automatically our item is going to change. And if I decide to refresh this, we're going to consistently keep that persistent hello. Okay, so awesome. Yeah, we basically worked on the application. We basically build this application where we're able to mix with two tables, which is our users and our to-dos tables. Okay, so in the next section, what we're going to do is just kind of clean some of these errors that we have over there. It's not going to be too long. And then after that, we're just going to have a quick review. So I'll see you guys in the next section. Alright, so before we do any of our reviews, I just want to clean this up a little bit. So you can see over here that inside our login component, we actually forgot to add a class name. So I'm going to go to line 65. And you can see here that we do indeed have that class. So I'll change it to up there. And then let's see what else we get from this error. You're going to see that I'm pretty sure we still have more of that class error over there. So we'll just go through each one. So we'll go to also to line number 40. So list to do's line number 40, which is going to have the class name as well. What else? We also have that list to do's, which is going to be in dashboard.js, line 57. You can see right here that, wait, what's the error? Oh, actually, it feels like we actually got rid of all of it. It's awesome. Okay, so next we're just going to get rid of these small little errors. Don't worry too much about this. This is just coming from my end. But we can get rid of these res over here. So I'm going to go back into list to do's. The reason why it's saying this to us is because we actually don't need the res. You can see over here, what line was it? It was line 12. You can see here that we actually don't need this, right? Because we're not doing anything with that res. So we can just simply leave it as await, and that'll work perfectly fine. And then I'll go into this one as well to kind of clean it up. So I'll just go inside line 15 into edit to do. And we also don't need that. So I'll just get rid of it. Okay, and we're good to go. And I think everything should work out successfully. And also I'll give you guys the choice of whether or not you want to get rid of the little like console.logs, right? This is just for us to kind of see the data a little bit more clear. All right, so time for us to do a little review over what we did inside this application. All right, congratulations you guys for building this application. You can see over here that now, so I'll just make this a little bigger, that now we can go inside here and we can create all our private datas. So I can say good, and I could just add that data. And you can see over here that we're able to add it. We can even edit the information, so hello world. And we can edit that information as well. And if I decide to log out and I decide to go for a new user, so let's register someone that's called guest. And I just put the name as guest. I'll just keep it that way. You're going to see inside here that the guest doesn't have any to-dos. And if we decide to add some items inside here, you're going to see that when we try to go back to test@gmail.com, that our data continues to be persistent. And of course, we can delete it. All right, so yeah, that's pretty much it. So I'm just going to give you guys a quick review. It shouldn't be too long. Essentially what we did inside the client side. So I think there's pretty much just two big things I want to talk about on the client side, because pretty much this is just a reflection between our JWT and PERN stack to-do list. Okay, so the big thing you want to understand is essentially what we did inside the dashboard, okay, and also the use effect. So as you see over here, what we did is that this right here was basically making a request to get all of our to-dos and also our names. So essentially now we had to pass in a token, or actually, yeah, we always had to pass a token inside there. But if you notice, whenever we had to input or whenever we had to edit or delete something, we also had to add, like our header, we had to add the JWT token in order to access that route. So I introduced this thing called the headers constructor, which allowed us to append multiple headers inside an object and to just put it inside here so we can make one big request with the headers that we needed, or to attach our headers. Okay? And then inside our dashboard, essentially, we took all the to-dos and we passed it as a props to our list to-dos so it can use that data. And then also the last thing that we focused on was this use effect and the cool ability that we can do with it. Essentially, what we did in the beginning is that when we went inside our list to-dos, I believe, that was when we used the use effect. Because what we learned is that the use state is not going to re-render our little state over there. Because the thing is that it's automatically going to give us that empty array, and then when the request actually does come, it's not going to re-render that to-dos. So we need to have that use effect, which is going to watch that state whenever it changes. And if it does change, then it's going to continue to set the to-do state to all to-dos. And then we applied the same exact logic to our dashboard, where we want to check whenever something was changing. Whenever we added something, whenever we updated, basically we ran this type of code over here. We ran this function. And essentially what we did is that by passing it down, whenever we created something, so for example, input to do, we basically ran this function, which was a prop sent to us. And where is it? We basically sent this and we basically activated set to-dos change true. So the to-dos actually did change. And when it did change, we went back inside the dashboard, which took that response and noticed that the state has changed. And then it's going to continue to get all the to-dos and the names again. And then it's going to set to-dos change to false because the process has been completed. All right, so yeah, congratulations. And that's pretty much what we did inside this application. Okay, so I wish you guys best of luck in your other programming stuff, and I'll see you guys later. Bye.